Just stay here. Is she going live?
Yeah, I see the live indicator.
We're not live yet. We're not live yet. I'm on the YouTube.
All right.
I think there should have been some network issues. Why am I yawning? Like, I don't know why I'm just yawning. I think I'm very tired.
Long day, huh?
Yeah. Okay. I think we're live now. Okay. We're live now. Okay. Hi. Hi everyone. Good evening. If you can hear me, can you wave? Web3 clubs. If you can hear me, can you wave? So we know you're with us. Amazing, amazing. Where are the rests? Aya Labs and the others. Anyways, uh it's really nice to be here again. Uh to be hosting the seventh session of Tech Talk Tuesdays. I hosted the fourth session and it was amazing, right? So I'm really looking forward to this one. And thank God we have Mufi in the house. It's gonna make it interesting. So before we start, I would like to introduce myself again for those that do not know me. My name is Caris, and I'm the program manager at Web3 Ladies, and also the co-founder of Base Africa. Yeah, so our Web3 Ladies, we're on a mission to onboard the next 100,000 highly skilled African female technical talent. And out at Base Africa, we are also on a mission to onboarding um, a million Africans on chain, right? We are working to help or contributes in achieving the goal of base, right? Of onboarding the next a billion people on chain. So that's what we're doing. And we have like different initiatives set in place to do that. We're actually starting with community onboarding on our Twitter spaces before we go over to our IRL initiatives. And so because I'm here and I'm saying this, I'm just going to put this out here. If you are a community and you would like your community to get started on base, you can reach out to me, right? So we help to talk to your community about base, get them to understand what base is all about and how they can contribute and grow and earn, and also get them started on the base Coinbase wallets, as well as get them started on Base, get them onboarded to Base through Webcast, right? For those that are just saying about Webcast for the first time, Webcast is a decentralized social media platform, just like Twitter, but this time built on chain, right? And with Webcast, you can partake in the Universal Builders Income by Base, right? Where you get to build, create value, create impact, and get rewarded for it. So I think that's all about me and what I do. Today we are here to talk about cross-chain interoperability. I don't know what the word is. Cross-chain interoperability and cross-chain, right? And we have Mofi in the house to talk about that, who is a protocol engineer at OP Labs. And before I pass the mic on to Mofi for us to start the agenda for today, I'd like to give a shout out to, although we have just one community here, which is, I don't know why. We usually have like many communities on board. But yeah, shout out to you guys, Web3 clubs. You guys are always here. I wasn't on the last two sessions, so I don't know if you guys have been keeping your streak. But anyway, shout out to you guys for being here once again. All right, so I'm going to pass the mic now to Mofi to introduce himself, and then we can get started on the agenda for today. Mofi, you have the mic.
All right. Thanks, Karis, for that intro. Um, it's great to be here. Hello, everyone. Nairobi, Onchain Safari. I've never been to one of these events, and I'm pretty excited to be here presenting for y'all because I think I've got something pretty juicy to talk about.
I'm actually particularly looking forward to this session, right? Because Base is part of the super chain and built on the OP stack. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this session actually. So okay, before I think Mofi, you would like to share your screen, right?
Yeah.
You can actually share your screen. I think people needs to bring you on board. I don't know, but you try and see if you can share your screen. For everyone here, if you have questions, those that are watching live and Web3 clubs and every other person that is watching live right now, if you have questions on the session as we are, as Mofi is talking, you can have your questions on the chat. You can put your questions in the comments and we will take them immediately. The central code is here. Welcome, the central code, Kampala, Uganda. Nice to have you guys here. So, like I was saying, if you have questions on the topic, even before Mofi starts talking, right? I'm sure that you guys already know about the topic and you must have made your research and have questions, right? So you can put them in the chat and we will take them from there. And while Mofi is talking, you have more questions, coming on board. You can put them in the chat or the comments and then we will take it up from there. So yeah, Mofi.
Awesome. All right, let's get this started.
Before we get started, if you're happy to be here and you believe you're going to get a lot of value from Mofi's session today, please, I want you to put emojis in the comments. Let's know that we are happy and we are ready for the show today. Let's have emojis in the comment section. If you're ready for the show today, for the event, and you're ready to listen to what Mofi has to say, and you believe you're going to get a lot of value from this topic today, I want to see emojis in the comments. If we don't get emojis, we'll just close the session. Mofi, right? We'll end the session and everybody can go home.
It's fine. Even if we don't get emojis, I'm sure people will change their mind once they listen to it.
Okay, we're getting emojis. Nice. So if you are looking forward to the session, please, and you are happy for us to start, please let's see emojis in the comments so we know that we are together and we are ready to, delve into an amazing session today with Mofi. Amazing. I'm seeing some emojis. Nice. I want to see 3 more emojis. Then we start. Can we get emojis in the comments so that I know that you guys are looking forward to the session and you're happy to be here? And then not drag you and say, "Ah, come and listen to Wofi." There's no drag you here. You're actually here because you want to learn and you believe you're going to get value. Let me see one more emoji and then we start. Thank you, with hand. I don't know how to pronounce the name. Thank you for your emojis. Thank you, Techmanade. I see your emojis. Thank you. Cokev Solomon. Coco is also sending an emojis. Amazing. Okay, so I think we can start now. Yeah, Mofi.
All right. Yeah, I feel refreshed by those emojis. All right. So, yeah, I'm here today to talk about blockchain interoperability, or just Interop for short, because that's a handle to pronounce at each time.
Yeah, it's easy, much easier that way.
Yeah. So, this is like specifically for like Ethereum. I'm less concerned about like other L1s, but I think there's some learnings about like how Interop, or how the ecosystem and landscape of Interop in Ethereum can be applied to other chains. So a quick intro, I'm Mofi, or Infi on the interwebs and various platforms. I'm a protocol engineer at OP Labs, been there for a couple of years now. I work primarily on fault proofs, but I also have like a pretty deep interest in Interop, which is also something that OP Labs is spearheading the development of.
Wow, amazing.
So I guess just give you an overview of like this talk, like kind of want to go over what is like the current state of like Ethereum scaling. Because we all know, like, everyone and their pets is like has an L2. All the action is happening on L2s. L1 Ethereum is still important, but like the best apps, the most exciting apps, they're all on L2. So I want to like talk briefly about like how that relates to Ethereum and the ecosystem. And then we're going to segue into like Interop. What is Interop? What are the problems that Interop tries to solve? And why do we even need the Interop in the first place? And then I'm going to end this with like, future leaning thinkings of like, what should we look forward to? What is happening over the horizon? All the cool projects that are coming out, they're going to leverage Interop. All right. So I think this is pretty uncontroversial. Like, rollups are scaling Ethereum. If Vitalik talked about this rollup centric roadmap like 4-5 years ago. I think the Ethereum Foundation pretty much realized that if we're going to scale Ethereum, we can't just do this in the protocol and then try all these cool ideas in the protocol, because Ethereum cannot. There are various reasons why Ethereum can't move that quickly, and it's better to have like experimentation across different L2s, and then we'll merge in, what is the best feature set from these L2s that are scaling Ethereum. So when I say rollups are scaling Ethereum, it's because rollups are Ethereum. This is all in part of the Ethereum-centric roadmap for rollups. So these are just some charts like illustrating the point. Like you take a look at the activity, number of transactions sent across all L2s, and the scaling factor kind of like illustrates that. If you look at all the L2s currently, there's way more transaction volume compared to L1 Ethereum, right? And so I have another chart here that's just a share of like Uniswap transactions. Uniswap, it's one of the biggest protocols, if not the biggest. And if you look at its like usage across different chains, Ethereum mainnet is like a pretty small chunk compared to everything else, like Polygon, Optimism, and Arbitrum. So this just further illustrates the point that a lot of the activities that a lot of the usage and activity is happening on L2s rather than L1s. So this is another chart here, just again belaying the point. This is the amount of gas used per second on L1 Ethereum. It's like 30 million gas, right, on a 12-second block time. You amortize that to like 2.5 million gas per second. However, the activity we're seeing on OP stack chains, effectively the superchain, is like quintuple that, more than quintuple that, right? So there's a lot of like activity, and I think this is good evidence that you should care about L2s if you don't already. So all of this, effort into
1 minute. 1 minute,
yeah,
Mufi. So I'm seeing the live, and we are 17 currently watching now. So I would like us to do something before Mufi continues, right? Because this session is really an awesome session, right? And it's going to be very valuable. So what I would like us to do is, for everyone here, I'd like us to take the link and share it to our contacts, our WhatsApp, Twitter, wherever, whatever platform we are comfortable with, right? Let's share the link so that more people can get to sharing this value they're about to get from Mofi today. So please, if you're here, I'm seeing 17 people. I want to see 34 people and even more, right? So if we all can share the link for this live for our friends, loved ones, send it to your enemy. Because if you love your enemy, they'll no longer become your enemy, right? They'll no longer be your enemy. So please share the link across all platforms so that more people can get to join in this show today and get the value you are about to get. So please, let's share the link. Thank you very much as you do. Okay, we can continue, Mofi.
all right. So yeah, so like going just quickly the previous slide. Yeah, so you can see all the scaling activities happening on L2s. So that's all like fine and dandy, but now like we have like a new problem. You have like a pretty fragmented ecosystem. All these L2s, they're effectively silos, islands, whereby users are bifurcated across them, liquidity is bifurcated across them, apps are present in some chains but not others. So this is kind of like another problem that was created as a result of this rollup-centric roadmap, but I think it's something we can like overcome. So this is like a funny meme GIF where Vitaly posted, where all of these FUD things that people said that Ethereum can't do, we just keep knocking the ball out of the park and solving those problems. And now, the Green Reaper is knocking on fragmented ecosystem FUD. So we're going to solve that problem.
L2s are just multi-sigs.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
So like, just to give you like some examples of like what I mean by fragment ecosystem. Think about like when you want to play like an on-chain game, but the game like maybe they like use ETH, native token to like pay for gas fees or something, but all your funds are on a different chain. Like let's say you're in base chain and you want to play games on Metaster, for example, right? Um, you would have to like bridge your assets to those chains first, just so you can play a video game, right? An on-chain game. And doing this even just with MetaMask, like you'd have to like switch RPCs, manually put in the RPCs, make sure that you've got the chain ID and all that, and then verify and approve the transaction. It's not a good user experience.
Yeah.
And as an app developer, right, you also have like the similar problem where different L2s have like different semantics, whether it's like different block times or different RPCs that you have to like keep track of. So if you have like an app that you've deployed to multiple chains, you would have to like be very careful to make sure that they're all configured right. And you lose sometimes you even lose the benefit of like having a single address because you've enshrined some chain specific behavior. So you can't use like a create to deploy it to have like a consistent address across all chains. And then most of all, like the big thing, at least that annoys me, is like liquidity is like not evenly available across all chains, right? There's some chains that are focused towards like certain protocols. Those protocols are sometimes available on other chains, but the liquidity is not there as like their primary chain. Like a good example of this is like I guess like Velodrome, right, on Optimism. Um, and I believe they deployed on base as well, but like it's just using the app there is not as feasible as just using it natively on Optimism. And you can think of like other examples in base as well, right? So all of these problems, I think they highlight like a general theme that a user has to like users and developers have to be mindful of the specifics of each chain, and they need to work around that. So this is kind of like the whole crux of like interop and why this is a thing. So just quick defining what interop is. So I mentioned the slide. It's kind of like the ability to think of all these different networks as a single network, right? Different chains, a single chain, have a global unified view of state, of assets, of protocols, such that the user or the app developer doesn't have to like write or think specifically about the particulars of any chain. This is actually kind of what we already have with L1 Ethereum. We're just trying to get back to form because now that we have rollups and L2s and there's so many of them, everything just all got split apart and we lost that really nice feature. So Interop is the idea that we can get back the convenience of L1 Ethereum while having different rollups and different L2s, but they all just compose together pretty nicely. So yeah, this is basically just echoing what I just said. Like Interop, it's the idea that you're seeing a set of chains as a single chain, right? So it means single account, single smart contracts. If I like, for example, deploy Uniswap to Optimism Base, Zora, etc., right? As like a user, I shouldn't care which specific chain it's deployed to. All I care about is my wallet tells me this is the address, air quotes, of Uniswap, and I can interact with it from any chain. All I need is like OP ETH and I'm set. So same thing here. Interop also kind of looks like a shared set of standards such that you can interact with all these chains in a very unified and smooth way without having to think about the specifics of each chain. So I think a good example of this is like ERC20s, right? It's a very good standard. most tokens implement this. When you're interacting with an ERC20, you don't have to think about, oh, this is a Uniswap token, or this is a X token or Y token. All you care about is just this. It's an ERC20. So we want to like have that same user experience, but in general, when you're interacting with chains and when you're interacting with all L2 chains. And so another good thing that this kind of looks like is you have like fluid assets. So I would take the analogy of like L1 Ethereum. I have like let's say a DAI, right, or USDC asset on L1 Ethereum, and I can transfer it to like any account. I don't think about the validator or the block builder needed to make that transfer. It just works, right? So similarly, I think when the final state of what Interop could look like is that you would have the same user experience. You could just easily transfer assets across L2s, and you don't even care about which L2 is actually involved in that transfer. You own an asset on L2, think of it as like some other dimension that has your assets, and you don't care about which L2s in particular that's needed to do that transfer, right?
Mm.
So you might be wondering, like all these issues that we've created because of this roll-up-centric roadmap, like, is it worth it? And I would argue yes, because it's not possible to scale Ethereum without L2s, and thus it's not possible to scale Ethereum without Interop, because Interop is like the final piece
I'm going
that
to
is
interrupt
needed.
you again, Mofi.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
mean, yeah, so I would encourage everyone to ask their questions. If you have questions so far on what Mofi has spoken on, please do well to put the questions in the comments and we'll be taking them immediately we get them. So yeah, if you're asking questions makes you learn better, right? So if you have more questions, if you have any questions at all on the topic and on what you have said so far, so please put them in the comments and we'll take them from there. Thank you. Okay, go on. Hope we are still sharing the links. Hope we are still sharing the links. If you have not shared the link, please do so. If you were here last week and you knew someone that was here last week and the person is not here this week, please share the link to the person and remind them to join in. And if you have not shared with your community, kindly do so now. Share with your community, your friends, put it on your WhatsApp status, and get everybody in here to get this value. So, again, if you have questions, put them in the comments. Mofi, I'm seeing some questions in the comments. Uh, is
Yeah,
that the same as CCIP? Can you see them?
yeah, I can see them.
I don't.
CCIP. Actually, remind me, what is the CCIP acronym? I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, Muhangi, if you would like to explain the CCIP, just put the full word or the full sentence or whatever, what the CCIP stands for, so Mofi can answer that question. I think there's another question here on, so how is Interop implemented?
I will go over, at least at a very high level, how Interop is implemented, how the solutions of Interop, how they kind of work. But after like going over the slides, happy to like go into details on specific implementations, particularly like the superchain implementation of Interop. But yeah, I got you.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. So you can go on. You can still put more questions and then we'll take them. So Mofi, you can go on.
All right. So I think it's pretty clear that we do need L2s to scale Ethereum, and thus we need Interop to like bring them all together. Um, and this is kind of like gives you examples of like kind of why it's hard to do this on L1, right? Um,
Mm,
like we all know about the gas debate of like,
true.
what is the max number of gas that we want in L1? um, the increasing centralization of like node requirements, because you're running like you're requiring bigger and bigger nodes to like maintain state. And
Yeah.
there's also like the issue of like, what I mean by convergent resource pricing in this slide is basically the fact that um, not all gas is created equal, right? There's like gas and data, and Ethereum currently, while it does have like a sort of okay gas schedule for both. It's not always appropriate for every chain, and it's good to be able to have L2s that have like a more different gas schedules that is specific to the applications that they support, as opposed to having like a very one size fits all. So these are just a few couple of reasons why it's very hard to like scale L1 Ethereum intrinsically, as opposed to just having rollups and having these different chains specialize on what they do best, and then using that as like the gateway for scaling. So fragmented liquidity, this is a very big issue with like having fragmented like chains, L2s. And I've talked about this, and I'll quickly reiterate here. Like there's the issue of like you have an asset. If you want to like bridge that asset to a different chain, there's 2 steps involved. I have to like go through a bridge, burn it on my current chain, mint it on the other chain, and then I have to like spend the gas cost of doing those 2 operations, right? And then also, not to mention, it takes some time. I have to confirm the transaction for the burn and then confirm it again for the mint. It's not great UX. It's also like pretty inefficient price-wise. Like if you're interacting with like a swap, right? You're doing like a swap, for example. The on-chain oracles may not notice that you're swapping from X chain to Y chain in time, and it may like give you like worse slippage if you interact with Uniswap, for example, right? And high transaction cost, I talked about this. You're spending gas for each side of the equation. It's suboptimal, and yeah, like no standardization. Like goes back to the ERC20 idea. While ERC20 is still a thing on L2s, it's kind of like useless because there's no good way to like transfer an ERC20 from one chain to another, which is why a lot of like chains, including Optimism and Arbitrum, provide some sort of like a standard bridge that an ERC20 will wrap itself into, so that you can burn and mint tokens appropriately. But it's a pretty like clunky solution because like from the user's point of view, it no longer looks like an ERC20. It's just a bridge. And we want to get back that really nice user experience that we already enjoyed on L1 Ethereum, as opposed to relying on these clunky bridges. Okay, so now that I've like gone over like a couple, what Interop is, what does it try to solve, and why we need it. I want to like quickly, at a very high level, talk about like the various solutions that try to like implement Interop or solve the problem of Interop. So the first one, obviously, that I'm going to mention, Optimism superchain, right? It's basically the idea that it's basically just the Nirvana of like Interop, right? At least that's the way we think of it. Whereby you have all these chains, they're separate, but from the user's perspective, it's a single chain, right? We aim to like solve all the UX issues with superchain, and I can go over details of like how this works. Polygon, AGG layer, this is another solution that Polygon is championing, whereby they have like all these different chains, and they're able to like settle, they're able to like support cross-chain messaging within the protocol that are secured and finalized via zero-knowledge proofs. It's a pretty nifty idea. I also kind of quite like this because confirmation is dirt quick thanks to zero-knowledge proofs. You don't have to wait for like a fault proof on L1 or wait for like the cross-chain message to finalize. You can just trust it, at least to some extent, right? And layer 0, this is another similar idea in that vein, whereby you have like a bunch of like contracts that mediate, these cross-chain messages. And the cool thing about layer 0 is that you can plug it into like any chain. I believe it's designed to be easily pluggable, so it could work on Optimism or Polygon or Arbitrum. but it's not like an ing protocol solution. But it's also cool that folks are looking into solutions in that idea. And XERC20, this is one of my favorites. It's basically a protocol, a new extension to ERC20 to make it cross-chain compatible. This is like exactly what I've wanted as a user, because I can have like an ERC20 token, right, on Optimism, have it like wrapped in this XERC20 goodness, and I can transfer it to any chain without going through a bridge, or at least from my point of view, not explicitly going through a bridge. The token just handles that for me. The UX is just super nice with this model. And if we can have like XERC20, but for like arbitrary cross-chain messages, we would pretty much solve Interop, right? And that's what like various projects kind of work on, but it's a hard problem. And then we also have like Wormhole, of course. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with Wormhole. It's a little bit more centralized, but these guys were one of the earliest people to attempt to solve the problem of Interop by having like a very interoperable bridge that works across any chain, right? And there's many more I'm not going to go into, but it just gives you like an idea that this is a problem that people have been trying to solve for years, and I think we're getting close to the end of like getting the ultimate solution in all this. So if I were to like categorize all of these examples I gave, I kind of would say like there are three models here. There's like the centralized interop model where the communication across chains occurs via some kind of a bridge or some kind of like a centralized contract, which might be on L1 or a completely different chain. Point is, there's like a central point where every chain needs to be aware of, and they need to talk to this thing in order to like transfer messages correctly. Effectively, it's a router for cross-chain messaging. Which it has like pros and cons, right? It's pretty easy to like implement something like this. And I guess it gives you it alleviates some routing problems, because all you have to do is care about this one central component, and it can route like your messages to any chain pretty easily, at most one hop, right? Obvious downside is that it's centralized, so if this thing has like a bug or it ever goes down, then you're out of luck, right? Or you would have to like register every chain to interact with this service. It's effectively a whitelist, so it's not great for like censorship resistance, but it's got its uses, and I appreciate that at least something like this exists, while their other interop models did not. So the other case here is mesh, right? It's kind of like the idea that every chain is, or every shard, as some chains like to call it, they are interconnected, right? It's a very deep interconnected graph whereby every chain knows every other chain. And so it also solves the routing problem, whereby since you have a direct link or channel to any other chain, you don't have to worry about, okay, I need to send a message to chain A, which is going to forward it to chain B and chain C. You just do a direct hop to chain C, right? And it's also pretty nice. Like, I think it's nice for those reasons in general. The complexity of like managing all these connections can be prohibitive in some cases, but it's got its uses. So there's some examples of this, like Cosmos, layer 0, right? And so like the third model, which I kind of like here, is the unified model, whereby, at least from the user's point of view, you don't even think about like connections to chains, right? You have a chain, and from the user can just assume that that chain is already connected to everything else. And so this is kind of thinking about like XERC20, whereby when you make a transfer, you don't specify that I'm making a transfer to this chain. No, what you're doing is you're taking your asset and immediately using it in a different chain for whatever purpose, whether it's to pay for on-chain gain or to do like a swap, right? You're immediately using it there as if the asset is local to that chain. So this is
Yeah,
very
that's
different.
awesome. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very different from mesh in a subtle way, in the sense that you're not making explicit references to these chains. You are acting as if you're a local resident user of that chain.
Mm.
Um, and I think these are the two biggest. This is the biggest thing that makes the user experience look very different. Even though, like tech-wise, they may look very similar under the hood, but the user experience between these two malls are very different for that reason. Okay. Um, I'll answer like one quick question about like the CCIP, or at least give like a unfortunately non-answer. I'm not very familiar with like the CCIP protocol. I do know like it exists as like a standard for interop, interoperability, like a couple years ago. But um, from what I remember, I believe it was more of a mesh type protocol because it did have like some sort of like contracts to um, have chains send arbitrary cross-chain messages in a very chain agnostic way. Um, and again, like same thing with like Mesh and Cosmos IBC channels. I think these are all very good models if you don't have the luxury of changing the protocol of the chains that you're interacting with. However, for various reasons, I think like a true solution requires a deep protocol rework of like how these chains coordinate with each other rather than relying on a smart contract. Like I think like using smart contracts to like implement interop can only get you so far because at a certain point you're going to be hitting against the limits of what you can emulate UX wise, right? The user at some point would have to be aware that I need to interact with this chain specifically to transfer my asset and play a video game using those assets. Whereas if you were to do this natively, and that chain supports it, you could hide a lot of that complexity from the user. So that's like my quick take on CCIP. But again, caveated that I'm not very familiar with it. I just know about it in passing. All right.
Thank you for that. I hope that who asked that question? Muhangi. I hope that's satisfactory enough. If you have more questions, you can also put them back in the comments. Uh, okay, someone is asking, please do a detail on how this works.
Yeah, I will go over the details of like how the superchain interop works at the end of this. My slides don't cover it, but I can do like a quick
Okay.
Q&A of like how it works. Yeah.
Okay, at the end, I'm going to just copy these questions. We are going to be answering at the end of the presentation. I'm going to put them in the chat so that you don't miss them.
All right, thanks for that. Okay,
Okay.
so we went over like the various interop examples of like interop solutions and what at least they purport themselves to look like in theory. But in practice, really, it kind of looks like a jigsaw puzzle that, while it sort of fits, you know that there's something not quite right. Like, if you were to find the missing pieces, the overall picture is going to look wonky. And the missing piece here in particular is like tooling, right? Uh, Effectively, even though you may have like a very nice solution with even like the unified solution where the user doesn't really care about specific chains when interacting or sending cross-chain messages, all the tooling that everyone relies on, thinking of MetaMask, Etherscan, RPCs, Alchemy, they're still not interop ready. They still have like this central, this notion that these are all separate chains, and thus this has like a downstream effect on users because users still need to like interact with these tools in order to do the actual operation on chain, send that cross chain message, and we're just back to square one again, right? We didn't really solve anything. Like we solved things in the protocol in theory, but the rest of the ecosystem still relies on this notion of like disparate chains, right? And like rather than a unified model. So I guess the point of this slide is just to emphasize that solving interop is more of an ecosystem effort. You can have like the best protocol that solves like a lot of the issues with like liquidity and user flow, but if you don't improve the tooling, then your work is not done, right? So there's still a lot of work to be done there, and I'll get into the details of like what we could do to improve this later on. So it seemed like you have like you solved interop, right? And you have like all these the tooling is well built for it, and like why should you even care? Are you happy as an app developer? Should you be happy with deploying on multiple chains, being very careful with the configuration, making sure that the all the specifics of each chain are well accounted for? And I would argue you shouldn't be, because I think that's very error prone. It just makes your life harder as an app developer to manage all of these different. They're effectively disparate protocols, even though they all have the same source code, right? Because you're deploying them on different chains, they are subtly different, and thus you have to manage all those like idiosyncrasies, right? So I think with Interop, once you solve all of those UX issues and you have like a very clean foundation, the benefit of that is that you would have a single deployment as an app developer. Create two addresses just work. You have like a very consistent address scheme that works across all chains. The tooling you use to like, manage your chain deployments doesn't need to be changed. The same tooling you use on L1 Ethereum will work on Optimism, will work on Base, will work on Zora, will work on Metal, any chain in the superchain. And very importantly, at least for the product side of things, you have like a much bigger user base to that are able to use your apps, right? The users would no longer have to like bridge their assets to the chain that you selected. They would just keep operating within whatever chain their assets are currently present in. Interops makes it possible for them to interact with your application without doing the complicated ritual of like bridging that asset in. And as a result, the decision to decide which chain to launch actually becomes less important, right? If I launch my app on Zora or Metal, like I can tap into users from Base and vice versa. So I think like the second order effect of this sort of thing is that app developers are probably more likely to spin up their own chains. Like the fabled app chain, as we've all, that was the meme like a year or two ago. I think that's going to have like a resurgence, because once you have like these application chains, you can do cool things like have a custom gas token that is native to your application chain, and you can onboard users by, rather than having them pay in ETH, you can have them pay gas using USDC or their preferred token. Anything you want, right? You can also like control like sequencer fees and MEV that way. It's just so much easier for an app developer. Um, Ignore the complexities of like launching your own chain, but though I would argue that the OP stack makes it a little bit quite easy. Um, but like once you have like your own chain, you have like just better control over your application, and you can easily tap into users across the super chain as a result. So that's kind of like my take of like where this is going to go. Once we solve interop, you would just have more app chains. All right, so I'm getting close to the end of this talk, but just like to give you like a sense of like what else is like coming down the horizon with interop ideas, specifically like superchain. Um, I think like token interactions would be even more seamless. Like I kind of already alluded to this. Um, XERC20 is a good step in that direction. It gives you basically shared liquidity, right? Because you have like a token that is superchain or interop native. It's no longer tied to a specific chain, but the extension of that is NFTs, right? Um, NFTs are, famously non-fungible. So what would it look like to have like a non-fungible token that can be used across the superchain? I don't know, but there are people working on this, and I think it's something that's durable. Um, it requires very careful engineering, but that's like one other application that I'm pretty excited for. To have like an NFT that is really uniquely global across the entire superchain, but I can also use it. I can like mint it from any chain and use that and flaunt that NFT across any chain in the superchain. That's a pretty valid idea. Um, Another cool thing that people are working on is like zero latency cross-chain messaging. The idea that within a single block, you can initiate a swap and then finalize that swap before like within the same block. And there are ways to like do this with like zero knowledge proofs, for example. You can kind of like finalize these cross-chain messages pretty quickly. Or another idea that people are like tapping into is like having some sort of like a bonded stake on cross-chain messages. This is something, yeah, you have to implement in the protocol layer, but to really have like zero latency. But the point is, I think with atomic swaps, the second order effect of that is like better price efficiency. Our arbitrators, right, can easily take advantage of like market inefficiencies and correct things. Users can. It's also like better UX for users because you don't no longer have to like wait until a block is included before you can go on and take the output of that to the next thing, right? You can just finalize all your operations on chain within a single block. So that's pretty cool. Interop, like, proposer builder separation. It's just the idea that you can have like multi-chain PBS and all these block builders can coordinate with each other across like a set of like chains. The benefits of this, other than it's like kind of cool, I think like it makes block building more efficient. A block builder that has access to transactions, or at least the transaction pool across chains, can do a better job building more efficient blocks, increase like the revenue, and generally like just there are also like second order effects of like curbing MEV as a result, right? Specifically multi-chain MEV. And yeah, standardized cross-chain oracles. It's also like another idea that once you have like a very nice standard for particular like ERC20s that work in the superchain, then it's very easy for an oracle to come in and track like, prices or events or what have you. As like, for example, a good example of this, like Etherscan indexes, right? You could write an indexer that reuses the same standardized events emitted by any chain within some super chain set. And it all just works out because those events are unique to globally unique in the entire interoperability set. So this means that I can keep track of whatever event or operation without rewriting that code or rebuilding something to keep track of every individual chain. It just all works out. All I have to do is follow some event log for a single chain, and all those events just flow naturally through my Oracle. So yeah, that's kind of like just a brief look into what is coming down the pipeline with all these Interop projects. I think it's going to be pretty exciting in the next like 6 months or so as these ideas come to fruition and make it really easy for users to interact with across different chains. So yeah, that is pretty much it. Happy to go over like some specifics, but if y'all have like additional questions, let me know, and happy to take them on.
Think there's a question here on that model. Do we send both the token and message or data on external owned accounts? Do you get the question?
On which model? I'm taking a message of that. So in general, I guess with cross-chain messaging models, um, you would only send the message. So it's basically the call data if we go to like specifics, but like the message that you're sending to other chains, you don't need to embed any additional states. Well, I'll take that back. There's some models where they do add some state proofs for efficiency. Like for example, Polygon's AGG layer do have some sort of like they call it acceptance proof. They're basically like inclusion proofs for ZKPs. And the whole point of that is just to short circuit finality. But in general, all you need is the message. State is not involved for all of this because it's assumed that when you send an interop message, you can resolve that state across chains in a very commutative way, right? You're not gonna have conflicts in that regard. So you just apply that message to existing state, or if you apply the message to the state later, it still works out. Does that answer your question?
Hangi, if that answers your question, please say so in the comments so we know that that is done. And then Coco, if you can pin up the other questions that we have, I think there's one that the Mofi was supposed to take at the end. That is how is Interop implemented and do a detail on how this works. I think that was talking about. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
There's also a question on ERC 6551.
Standard ALC 6551 NFT standard, which are cross chain. I don't know if that's a question. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I did not know about that there's an NFT standard that is cross-chain. I would like to look more into it. Thanks for sharing that.
Okay, I think you can pin the other question on the
All right.
implementation.
Yeah.
How is the interrupt implemented? I think you said you were going to go over that at the end of the slides.
Yeah, sure thing. I will go over pretty briefly on how the superchain works. This varies a lot. The implementation of Interop varies a lot depending on the protocol. Like AGG Ag layer is like very different from superchain, which is very different from layer 0, etc. But with regards to superchain, the way it works is it's a core protocol change to the OP stack, and it makes Interop an intrinsic attribute of L2 blocks in a nutshell. So what does this mean? This kind of means that when we're deriving blocks, L from L1 and unsafe blocks in L2, um, there is a facility that can keep track of blocks or data or inputs that are presented from other chains. And those inputs are effectively tagged as interop. And as the derivation process keeps working, um, those blocks eventually get resolved and admitted into the L2 chain. And so this follows the same flow we have with like unsafe blocks to unsafe blocks, and then eventually you achieve finality that way. There's a similar process here with interop blocks. And I'll quickly go over the details of like how these inputs are fed into the derivation. So effectively on Optimism, there's a contract we call the cross L2 inbox. It's effectively just a message queue of cross-chain messages. So if you're on base and you want to send a message to Optimism, you or OP, you would send a message via that L2 cross L2 inbox. The user could do this, but ideally in the future, wallets would do this on the user's behalf and abstract all of that away, so it's the user doesn't have to think about it. So once a message is in that contract, it's effectively called an initiating message. You've initiated the cross-chain transfer. Then a node on the target chain, in this case, it would be Optimism because you're sending a message from base to OP, will observe events emitted by this cross-chain to L2 inbox. And if sorry, just back up for 1 sec. One important thing about this whole setup is that nodes will have to follow every chain that is interoperable. So this kind of like pushes the complexity from users to node operators. And the reason why is because the nodes need to be able to observe whenever a cross-chain message is being emitted so that they can apply to their own chain. And that's what the whole cross L2 inbox is for. It's just a standardized way for signaling messages that should be emitted at other chains. Okay, so going back to kind of what I was saying, once a message is observed by the target chain's L2 cross-chain inbox, the node will pull in that message and immediately apply it into its own chain. Now, there are some policies that dictate exactly when those messages can be applied, but there are some constraints effectively that if you were to send a message at some point, your message is going to get applied into the other chain. And so this model is kind of different from, if you go back to the previous slides on, all these different models, it looks kind of unified because you have all these chains. You have like nodes listening or following events from every other chain. And all of those events get applied directly into the target chains. It's in the target chain. So this is intrinsically a property that we're adding to the derivation pipeline, if you're familiar with that in Optimism. And in protocol change, that guarantees to some extent that interop messages are applied to L2 nodes. So the benefits of doing this is, one, you can avoid censorship because this same model can be applied to deposits in the sense that you could deposit a message via L1 and that message could be an interoperable message, or rather a cross-chain message. And furthermore, it's also faster, it's also quicker to finalize these messages because you have nodes that are listening to events in these chains. And as soon as they observe a cross-chain message, they immediately apply it into the target chain. So that it's a very high level review, but mindful of time, I hope that kind of like gives you a sense of like how it works, at least for Optimism and Superchain.
I think Tech Man, Tech Manage. If that answers your question, please put it in the comments that you are satisfied, and then we know that we can move on from your question. Thank you so much for that, Mofi. I think we have another question from Cookeb. Coco, can you pin it up? Thank you. If someone wanted to create an L2 for Africa, tailored to the African experience, how can they be on the super chain?
That's a very good question. Um, so we have the best way to be on the super chain is
Sorry,
to
1 minute. Please, if you asked any question and it has been answered and you're satisfied with the answer, please put in the comments satisfied so we know that, so Mufi knows that, he did justice to the question. But if you're not satisfied and you would like further explanation, please put it in the comments, not satisfied. I would like further explanation and then probably, give more detail on the question so that Mufi can take it up from there. Thank you very much. Mufi, you can go on.
yeah. Um, so we have this thing we call it
Thank you. Take my
the
take my
eight. Yeah, thanks. So when you launch an L2 or specifically an L2 built for the OP stack, um, there are a myriad of ways you can configure that L2. However, in order for that L2 to be eligible for the superchain, the minimum requirement is that it follows what we call a standard configuration. And there's specifications for this. I can link it to them in the chat. But a standard specification details the parameters, the settings, the requirements, and the checks that we require L2s to follow in order for them to be added to the superchain set. And part of the reason why we do this is so that we want every chain that is in the superchain um, to be at the very least to be a good addition to that superchain in the sense that we don't want to have to deal with like reorg issues. We want to have like a very consistent standard and configuration such that it's very predictable and very easy to interop with these chains. Because again, with the OP stack, there is a lot of like configuration that is that some chains choose to um, be very dynamic with them. But because we're trying to be very interoperable, it's best to have like a very consistent standard that we set out for these chains. And also, we do want to make sure that these chains were derived properly and carefully from L1 in the case that they're using like alternative genesis, for example. But the point is, you have like follow this superchain config. It's mostly like a set of technical requirements. There are some requirements in there that affect legality. Like for example, we want to make sure that the chain state was generated in a very correctly. That there isn't any unintended state or hidden state in the chain. And from there, I think like the rest is you just talk to folks at Optimism and just say, hey, I have a chain. We're following the standard config. What else do we need to do to make this happen? And we can help you with that. But that's like the bare minimum. You would like first step you would do to being added to the superchain.
Thank you. Coco, if you're satisfied, kindly put satisfied in the comments. And if you're not unsatisfied, so that Mufi can take it a step further. So we have one other question. We have like, I think I'm seeing some four more questions in the comments. I'm sorry, I'm actually the one asking those questions. So the next one is what specific cross chain applications is Optimism currently developing or exploring, and how can builders tap into it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a
For
very
the
excellent
developers
question.
and builders in the house. What do you say?
Yeah, I said that was a very good question. Um, it's very interesting because like we're kind of also pretty early in Interop, and there's like so many ideas. We're actually just trying to like prioritize which application or which product we want to like build first. Um, and it's also like hard to like gauge what builders kind of want. So I'm really happy to ask this, and I can like ask the audience to see what they're thinking here. So like the first thing we're trying to do is set up the foundations. So that is like build standards to allow app devs to build on top of them and supercharge their app such that they're interop compatible. A good example of this is superchain WETH, right? Superchain WETH is wrapped ether, but is it's natively interoperable in the sense that you can take that wrapped ether, send it, you interact with it on any chain, and it looks from the user's point of view as if you're interacting with natively, locally, and then any specific chain. So you're not going through a bridge. You don't have to like burn mint. This is all handled under the hood by a superchain WETH contract. So what can you do with this, right? I think like with superchain WETH, you can then build like abstractions with your favorite token, superchain USDC, for example, whereby you would just have USDC that works natively across the entire superchain without users having to bridge assets manually. So that's like one example. Another one is, I think, we're also working on bridge flow. So in the sense that right now, if you have like USDC on L1 and you want to migrate that to a super chain, to a chain like Base, for example, you still have to go through a bridge, and that's all fine and dandy. But I think we can improve on the bridge flow in the sense that you can easily just select which chains you want that transfer to go, like in a very seamless way. So let's say there isn't superchain USDC yet, but you want to like split up your you want to bridge your assets across both OP and Base. With Interop, it makes it very easy to do all of this in a single transaction, as opposed to having multiple bridge transactions. So you're saving on gas, right? And this is just to illustrate the concept, but you can generalize this idea to just in general, any type of message that you want to split across different chains. So with Interop deposits, you can make a deposit and have that deposit initiate multiple operations that target a number of chains, all in a single transaction. So we're working on like actual like a flow for this in the I think in like the superchain bridge to make this sort of thing easy. But USDC, like splitting USDC assets, is like an obvious application of this. But yeah, those are like the two things. I think like they're mostly like foundational and low level because we don't want to like build something and then users are like, we don't really need this. But we want to like build the abstractions that I think y'all have like a better idea of like what users want, right? As application developers, and then y'all can just build on top of these abstractions and deliver really good value to users of the superchain.
Thank you for that. So Coco says she's not satisfied on her question until someone builds it. So who is in the house that is going to take the initiative to build that? If you're going to take the initiative to build that, let's see your hand in the comments. Do we have anyone from Web3 clubs that wants to build that? Do we have anyone from there that would like to build that? Show of hands. Okay, we can move on from there. So we have on that question, which language do you recommend while building these L2s?
Oh, that's a big question. So I guess like I would say like for the OP stack, when you're building an L2 for using the OP stack, we already have like software to do this. Particularly if you're using something like Conduits, which is an infra provider that lets you spin up OP stack chains at the touch of a button, right? You wouldn't even have to interact with a programming language. But if you're doing this like yourself, like manually, with your own infrastructure, um, you would use the existing software, which is primarily written in Go. So you would have to be somewhat proficient in Go, mostly so you can like configure your nodes and your chain and plug in everything and then register it in our superchain registry. But you don't need Go. It's actually very helpful to at least have someone on your team that knows Go so that they can debug issues when the need arises. But generally speaking, you don't need like to work on it at a day-to-day basis. You just needed to have your chain set up, and using the existing open source software, you're good to go. So that's like for the OP stack. But let me know if you just meant like L2s in general, and I can like give a more opinionated, spicy answer than that.
Thank you. So, the central code, if you're satisfied, please, you know what to do in the comments. We have another question from the central code, and I think this, I've actually been looking forward to this question because I was sure that someone was going to ask it. Where do we apply for grants if we are building L2s for Africa? Coco, you can pin that up. Where do we apply for grants if we are building L2s for Africa?
Yeah, that's a good question. My knowledge might be pretty outdated, and I might punt this to Coco if I get this wrong. But we do have and I'll link this in the chat. Can I link things in the chat? Oh, I need to log in. Okay. But we do have like a grants page in the Optimism. If you go to the optimism.io and go to like the Optimism Collective, there should be a link to a type form that is effectively the grant application. You would just specify excuse me, you would just specify, what the grant's for, and, and provide all the details required by the form, and you're set. But yeah, this is like based on like 5 months old info. I don't know if that's changed since. Let me see if I can actually confirm this right away.
I don't know if optimism is now probably, I think I saw something like the what's it called, retroactive grant. That is, they are not, I don't know if they're no longer giving grants before you build the product, or they are still doing that, but I think they have these retroactive grants where you build first, and if it's valuable or impactful enough, you can, I think, apply to the different grants that they have, and then you can get one. I don't
Yeah.
know.
The retro funding, yeah, that is pretty much retroactive. You build it and then you get rewarded for it. But I believe we still have like specific grants. Though
For before you
those
build.
grants, I'm not sure if those grants include like building an L2, but there's like a list of projects or um, problems that we kind of like want solutions for, and if someone were to go and attempt to like solve it, we would offer them a grant for that. But there's like a list of projects rather than I don't think an L2 for that is in
It's part
there,
of
but
them.
it probably should be. Like an L2 for like Africa kind of makes sense. So I think there's some advantages to having region focused L2s just in general. Yeah.
Okay. I think another question, which data availability? Okay, okay, let's take this one first. Okay, which data availability layers do you recommend best for building L2s? I think we should just take all the L2 questions and then we'll move on to the other others. Which data
Yeah,
availability layers do you recommend best for building L2s? Coco, you can help pin that up.
yeah, got it. Um, my default answer is always, just use L1 with EIP444, blob transactions. It's much easier, or rather much cheaper to um, make your data available for your L2. Um, but that, even though it's pretty cheap, like historically, it may not be cheap enough for certain applications. In which case, it might make sense to use like some sort of like a LDA, like Plasma, that's backed by, um, I don't know, like I'm blanking on one data availability solution, but generally like Plasma approaches can work well, and the OP stack does support that natively. It requires a little bit of configuration, but you can hook up an OP stack chain with data, posted, or at least data commitments posted to some DAC that is built via Plasma, right? So I would recommend just by default, just use blob transactions. If that's not cheap enough, then you can use something like an LDA like Plasma.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Chantal said the thing about grants is the builders need to be accountable on how they use these funds. Of course, yes. It's same thing as someone giving you, apart from grants, anything, you have to be accountable for whatever is being placed in your hands. Thank you for that contribution. There's another question here. Do you think it would be easier for regulators to pose regulatory risks on superchain as it gets more adoption and maybe dominance by user base? And maybe dominance by user base. Did you get the question? Can you pin that up, Coco,
Yeah, can you
please?
pin that up? But while that's being pinned, I will respond to this question. EigenDA. Yes, you could use EigenDA as like your
Okay.
DA server. Um, there are, I don't know where they are. They used to be in the monorepo, but I think they got moved. The Optimism monorepo, that is. But the EigenDA does also support like Plasma style um, data commitments. You could use that. Um, but that wasn't the one I had in mind, and I'm still blanking on it. But EigenDA is it's a fine choice. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I think that question, Coco, you can help pin it up. Do you think it would be easier for regulators to pose regulatory risks? You can see it, right, Mofi?
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, Regulatory questions, not quite my forte, but I'll try to answer. Um, I think it would be sort of harder for regulators to shut down an entire super chain as opposed to a
That's true.
single chain. Um, the one risk probably might be worth calling out. I guess depending on what chains are, I guess, added to the interop set. I guess there are ways you could argue this. So like having an interop set with like different L2s, it's very analogous to having L2s interoping with L1 Ethereum. And so far, that has not been a problem, right? To have a rollup, Ethereum is doing its own thing, the rollup is doing its own thing. The scope, the regulatory scope of Ethereum doesn't really affect rollups and vice versa. So I don't think that should change with Interop, even though um, it's a more tighter like interoperable or whatever with these chains. So I guess I'm being a bit optimistic. I don't think it should be. I don't think the risks will be any different from how it is today. Um, Regulators should, but they might do something else. But I imagine like regulators would just consider these changes like very distinct, the same in the same way they consider Ethereum and base or optimism as like two distinct chains. But happy to like if you have like other opinions in that, happy to share and we can hash that.
Sorry, they just took my case here, and just interrupted. They just took my lights. I'm trying
Oh,
to get the Nigeria just happened. Okay, I think this is good enough. Okay, thank you for that, Mofi. I think we'll move on to the next question here, and that is on. Sorry. How do you see the evolution of consensus mechanisms impacting cross-chain communication? Looks like your camera was
yeah.
unplugged.
Um, I would imagine a properly built consensus mechanism. Well, okay, so one example of this, I would just give you like a quick example of where I'm framing my response for this to this question. And it's I guess Cosmos like IBC. Um, so that the way that works is there's effectively a layer of tenement nodes that coordinate and effectively verify um, cross-chain messaging. But this is happening in a separate layer and not deeply embedded into the chain. I think this is the right approach. You don't want to embed consensus um, specifically in a very deep way in chains in an interop set. And the reason is because of liveness failures. Um, unless the protocol were adapted to get around liveness failures, which is very difficult to do, unless you're considering the entire interop set as one chain. You could have like one chain create issues, intrinsic issues in a different chain if maybe it's not sequencing correctly or it's emitting invalid messages. But if you were to separate all of that communication into a different layer and then you only pull in the results as needed, I think it's a good way to isolate the impact of like liveness failures, right? So overall, like I think to answer your question, I don't see, at least in the short term, different like new consensus like protocols, specifically like for state replication, having being very useful for solving interop or impacting cross-chain communication. Because if you were to like use those protocols um, for cross-chain communication, it is no different from having an entire global chain, like an actual single chain, not just like what the user observes to solve the same problem. And so you don't have like two chains that are interoperating, you just have one chain. And so you would have the same problem that we were dealing with L1 Ethereum, where you have like a global ledger. Things are very centralized in the sense of like the protocol, gas schedule, all the problems we've talked about in the previous slides. And we're gonna have the same dance all over again. So a little bit long-winded answer, but I hope it kind of like gives you a sense of like I'm thinking about this. I think we lost shares, so all right, thanks, Cody.
I'm here. Yeah, no problem. So you guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Awesome. So first of all, I waited so long to wear this t-shirt, so I should show everybody my superchain t-shirt because I really believe in the superchain. Yes, Uganda. For me personally, you touched on regulation, but for me, it's the story behind optimism. that really, really motivates me to, like, I believe that every consumer has a choice, right? And when we choose which chain we interact on, we're choosing where our funds and where those gas fees go to. And by making a choice to utilize the super chain, first it was just optimism. You're making a choice to further fund public goods, and that's the funds that keep circulating back into creating all the amazing things that we see in our communities. And so for me, the super chain is, yes, about the technical interoperability, but about the vision interoperability as well, right? It has really a widespread mission around public good. So happy to support. I'm very, very grateful for you being here, Mofi. It's been a long time coming. And so getting you to share, getting you to share with the community has been really awesome. For me, I'm really curious to learn more about those projects that you were talking about that Optimism wants to see being built, because we have hackathons all over the African continent coming up. And so one of the main reasons for doing these Onchain Safari series was to connect all the African Web3 communities together and share knowledge together and learn together, learn in community. And so just in 2 weeks, we have ETH Accra. It's a hackathon. So you can join virtually. Anyone that's listening from Ethiopia, from Tanzania, from Uganda, you can join that hackathon virtually. Right after that, we have Web3 Lagos. So if you haven't registered for all these hackathons, please do so. You can see them all on the Onchain Safari or the African Onchain Collective calendar on Luma. And then lastly, we also have Eat Safari, which of course I'm a part of. And luckily, we have Optimism sponsoring a bounty. I can't announce how much yet, or share a little bit, or I can't share all the details yet. But I want you guys to start thinking about what are the projects you're going to build on Optimism. We have many members of the super chain participating. So whether you're, like I said, anywhere in Africa, you can participate virtually. Of course, it's in real life in Kenya. So I think the last question for you, Mofi, is like, what do you want? What do you want people to be building? What do you think is super cool? Give us some ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, that was all well
I
said.
know it's.
Appreciate that. uh, Definitely like something interop related. It's hard to suggest ideas there because interop is still under construction. There's some details in the specification that will change in the coming months, but like just at least at Optimism, that is like the project that we're all working on. And I think I would start by taking a look at the specs, the current specs. Some of what has been written may give people ideas on apps that would be compatible with what's currently written. But in general, like I think anything that solves user UX issues would be great. Like one idea could be some sort of like an RPC that abstracts like ETH calls or that abstracts like RPC requests across different chains. So you would have like a single endpoint, and the RPC just knows if you're interacting with Base or Optimism, and it just handles that, hiding it from the user. That would be like a cool app that would get us a bit closer to Interop Nirvana and Superchain. Another idea could be making it a little bit easier for chains that people spin up to support a custom gas token. Like we do have like a custom gas token spec that chains could like adopt, but I think it's missing some sort of a way to plug in some other chain like Base to use their assets in your chain and pay for gas using USDC, for example. This is still a manual thing that a chain operator would have to manually support. But if there's a way that users could do this out of their own volition, just the general theme of like user freedom, that irrespective of like what the gas is priced in, I can pay for gas using X token or Y token, and it all just works seamlessly. I think that'll be a cool thing to have. So yeah, that's kind of like where I'm thinking. It's all going to be interop focused. And yeah, you can also like hit me up offline or whatever, and if I have like more ideas, happy to like chat about it.
Amazing, amazing. There's only a couple weeks left until all these hackathons, so you better start thinking of more ideas, Mofi, because we're gonna come back to you and be like, what are we gonna build? So I think we can wrap it up here because I think Chris answered all of the questions, and we're a little bit over time. But one, I'm super grateful. Every week we come on here, and I'm blown away at how much I've been learning personally throughout all of these series. So if you have a friend that hasn't checked these out, all of the recordings are on YouTube. It's nothing like joining live. I think that there's something special about learning in community at the same time together. But the recordings are a great place to start. Actually, there's a question I had that I didn't really get to the root of, which is like, how did you start, Mofi? Like, I think we touched on it when we met, but curious to learn more about that.
Yeah, sure thing. Happy to answer. So I started like my crypto journey kind of like started really deeply at DeFi Summer. That was like the first time I started digging deep into various like protocols, consensus protocols, apps, and how everything worked, as opposed to just being a consumer. So by DeFi Summer, just in case for folks that don't know, this was like summer 2020. You had like COVID, people were like stuck at home. And what else are you gonna do? You're gonna like start reading stuff, right? So then like as I got like a very deep appreciation for like how things kind of worked, I just feel like I want to like there's like a lot of cool ideas in this space. There are not enough people working on them or looking at them, and I wanted to like contribute. And so I kind of like started with optimism, right, as like kind of my go-to for that. And I've been like pretty happy at like having the opportunity to like work on a myriad of different problems. Like my early thing at OP Labs, right, was um, changes to like the back then the L2. We had like this thing called L2 Geth, which is just like it predated Bedrock, but it was basically OP Geth, and working on that for a bit, which then pivoted to it's kind of like you level up. You work on Geth, get familiar with it, so now you can work on bigger stuff. I worked out on EIP 404, blob transactions, did a lot of the early prototyping in both Geth and Prism node clients. So, and then you take that knowledge, you level up again, and then get deeper into the tech stack, right? And then that got me into like working on fault proofs, where you're thinking about the entire system end to end, the implications of like performance, node, storage, security, the whole gamut. And so it's nice to see. What I like about Interop is nice to see like a culmination of all these ideas, and then building like a product that users can observe and it actually affects them. Like fault proofs are great, and don't get me wrong, like they're super important for L2s, and users care about it, and they should care about like security and ensure their chains are fault provable. But this is something that we can actually give directly to other users that are not yet onboarded into the superchain, and have like a very tangible benefit that they can immediately see and go wild with it. So so that's kind of like my whole journey, like yeah, so it got me into where I am today.
Two last questions, very important questions. One of them is, if you're a developer from Africa and you want to work at Optimism, you want to like gain the skills so that you could be qualified enough to work at Optimism. What do you suggest that you do?
I would say get your hands dirty. Really, there's no replacement for that. Of course, like it's good to read about like how all these protocols work at a very deep level, um, and you get familiar with like the state of the art of like consensus protocols and blockchains. But ultimately, at Optimism, we're not just a research outfit; we are builders. So, and the best kind of people that will succeed at Optimism are those that have gotten their hands dirty and have actually built stuff. So that's like my biggest recommendation. If you have like ideas, any itch that you have, like just build it. One of my early projects, and this is also a DeFi summer, that I worked on in my spare time, from my other job, was um, basically a gas price predictor, right? I was applying like ideas I had from working at fintech a while ago, to predict what is the best time to interact with the chain to minimize gas costs. So just looking at gas prices, you come up with like an indicator like volume weighted average price, but for like gas, right? And then I'll be like, oh, I get an alert in my app like, oh, I should probably do that swap at this time because that's the cheapest time for me to interact with Ethereum. Um, so just things like that, like any itch you have, just build it. And as you build, your knowledge will grow. You're gonna have that flex that muscle of like knowing what you should do and what you shouldn't. And the next time you build something, it's only just gonna get better.
Yeah, amazing. Um, Very recently, someone at Web3 Clubs was showing me something that they built that was something similar to that. So, Web3 Clubs, you're onto something. Keep building. And then, last and most important question is, when are you coming to Africa?
Ah, I hope like next year. Um,
Nice.
yeah, like it seems really cool. I shouldn't say I should be surprised. Like I've been kind of like been following mostly from UCoco, but also on the side, like all the developments happening out here, and it's really great to see. And yeah, I hope to be at one of these events sometime next year. It'd be really cool to be there in person.
Yeah, amazing. We'll welcome you with open arms at any of these Web3 hubs. We usually have the Nigerian community with Web3 Lagos, and the Ghanaian community with Aya Lab joining us. But yeah, like this is some of the initial vision that was with Onchain Safari, so that you get to really actually see what does Kenya look like, and what does Uganda look like, and where are the builders. So I'm super grateful that you spent so much time with us, that you shared so much. I see so many more questions in the chat, but we'll end it off here. My announcement to everyone is that um, if you haven't registered for all of these hackathons coming up, you definitely should, mainly because you'll have a chance to actually build, flex that muscle, or build that muscle that Mofi was talking about. Um, and keep adding to your open source contributions. I think that's also super important. So stay tuned for next week's session. And if you are a project that wants to present, to pitch, no one pitched me this week. Um, but if you want to pitch your project on next On-Chain Safari, please reach out, and we'll coordinate that. Otherwise, Mofi, thank you. I'll be looking forward to hearing some more project ideas. And I'm pretty sure we're going to collaborate a little bit more on the Eat Safari Optimism bounty that we have. So looking forward to that as well. And as always, thank you everyone for tuning in. See ya for the last session next week before all of our fun events.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is great. See you.
Thank you. Oh, Chris. Welcome to Wi-Fi in Africa. Welcome to Wi-Fi in the world. Honestly, the world is fragile.
Oh my god, I've been struggling to join back in. I don't know for trying to connect me.
No, no worries, no worries. We're about to end off, but like I said, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you in the Onchain Safari chat, the African Onchain Collective chat. Bye,
Bye.
everyone. I'm gonna end the stream.
Bye.